Although he knew a great deal about the girl's life and her work, she gave him no cause for jealousy or doubt. The guy still didn't calm down even after that, and was very nervous, so he went to discuss it with Lisi. It became evident that no matter how hard he tried to hide his interest in Edith, he would never really cease to be interested in her, and would try to control her. When he told Lisi that Edith would now work with the butler and help him in some way, the girl said that it was good news. But it was the first time she had heard Renat praise someone else's work. After all, it only took one day to gain his trust. It was this that seemed too strange to the lad, and he asked Lisi if it could be because the butler was in love with Edith, and that was the only reason he had praised her since her first day of work. Kalyan tried to prove it by saying that their butler is single, and so he could very possibly be interested in Edith. Plus the butler sees that Kalyan is indifferent to her. Except apparently at this point, he doesn't care about the girl that much, no matter how much he tries to convince everyone around him that he does. Even they notice that Kalyan talks about it all the time, and his thoughts are all about her. But he only replies that there was no longer any interesting subject they could now discuss. And that was the only reason why he had begun the conversation for Edith's sake. How suddenly, when they tried to hear the truth from him and asked him why he was so interested in her, he had to go somewhere else. Maybe he really just got uncomfortable and Kalyan decided to run away. But for some reason he was really in a hurry, like he actually had something to do. He was met by an assistant and said that the carriage had been ready for a long time, so it was already possible to go on business. But Kalyan asked to wait a little while, and said that he would be there shortly. Edith's beauty is different from Lisi's. They really are very different girls. And if a sensitive girl like that stays in the same room for a few hours, it could have irreversible consequences. And perhaps out of jealousy, Kalyan decided to make sure she was okay and busy with work, and not something else he's already thought up and imagined along the way. The first thing that made him nervous and anxious was the open door, so he decided to enter without permission. As he entered the room, felt a very pleasant scent of rose, which could be heard even near the door. This fragrance is really hard to resist any man, because it is so pleasant and feminine that you really want to feel it all the time, and not to go anywhere. So as not to frighten the girl too much, the guy asked if there was anyone here. What he was most afraid of seeing right now was something like this, which only meant that he was trying to fool himself every time he said he wasn't interested in her and didn't care about her. But by his actions he proves that's not true, because he really wants to control her every move and who she hangs out with, especially guys. Even the little dolls in the shape of her, and some guy, made him very angry. Though maybe that doll in the shape of a guy was him, which was quite likely, and he didn't have to be nervous at all. At which point Edith walks in and tries to explain that this is her new hobby, so these figurines don't mean anything. After that, the girl asked why Kalyan had allowed himself to enter her room without permission, and also started looking at her personal belongings. In order to make neither of them feel uncomfortable, the girl asked the assistant to immediately remove these figures in the form of a couple in love, which made the guy so nervous. When they sat down to talk, it was harder than they had imagined, and for some time it remained a mystery what Kalyan had come for he had important business to attend to. After he'd seen with his own eyes that Edith wasn't spending her time with some guy, but doing her favorite hobby, he felt much better. That's what he came here for, which was very surprising, because at this time he had important things to do that he had put off for her sake. During the conversation, for some reason the girl asked if Kalyan knew Mr. Renan Finch, and at the same time she realized that it was a very strange question, and of course he knew it, for Renan was one of the Duke's aides, and it was stupid to ask about it, and she didn't even know that it was because of the assistant that he had come to her, except that she had hoped not to see him here. His father was originally assisted by Viscount Theo Finch, and his father had great confidence in him. Now Baron Renan has taken his place. They grew up together since they were kids and saw each other almost every day, except that they had very different interests, so they didn't socialize much. Some liked to exercise, have fun, and spend their free time actively, and some liked to enjoy nature and spend time alone. So everyone understood that, and everyone did what they loved to do. Because they had little contact and spent little time together, they did not have any conflicts, so they maintained a normal relationship between them. One day, Kalyan defeated his rival and told him that he needed to train more. Only then he could compete on equal footing. And in order for that guy to get some practice, he decided to ask little Renan for help. And he also asked him if it wasn't boring to spend all your time with books and studying, because as it seemed to that guy, it wasn't interesting at all, because he was judging by himself, and didn't take into account that some people might actually be more interested in it than fencing, for example. To which little Renan replied that if his help was needed, he was happy to practice with them. With this, Callian only wanted to say that he and Callian had never been friends, because of their different interests. And besides, they were really quite different people, which was hard to imagine as friends. This was the first time Edith had heard that they had all known each other since they were children. But for some reason, the book didn't mention it in the book. The girl was really surprised that Renan spent all his childhood with the main characters. It turns out that the book does not tell about really interesting moments, which as it turned out there are really many. While talking to Callian, Edith wondered why he had suddenly come and told her about it. It wasn't like him, and they hadn't seen each other since that night. By the look on her face, he knew exactly what she was thinking. So he decided to explain why he'd come after all. It turns out he's on his way to inspect the Raisin estate, so it's a very important day. It is in the very north of the capital, and is a few days' journey by horse-drawn carriage, and is one of the estates which belong to the Duchy of Ludwig. Kilian, the Duke's second son, cannot inherit the duchy, so this territory will be given to him. He told her this in order to offer to go with him, as this trip could take quite a long time, and he would be gone for a very long time. After he hated her, and avoided seeing her every time. Of course it was very surprising to hear him propose such a thing. So in order to be safe and not feel uncomfortable, she said no. And it's not surprising, after the way he treated her before, the girl still reacted quite normally, and politely declined. Though initially she thought he was just kidding, and once again wanted to make her look like a stupid girl who believed his words. The only thing she wished him was a good road and a pleasant journey. After he left her office, Edith was sure that he had gone mad, and it was suspicious why he had suggested it to her and not to Lisi, since he was so good with her. It would be very foolish of him to expect her consent after all that had gone on between them before, and the way he had treated her. Toward evening, the girl was finished with her work, and it was finally time to rest. Especially after such a tense conversation with Callian, she just needed it, like taking her favorite bath, or having a tea party for herself before bed to help her calm down and relax a bit more. But before she left, she noticed a strange look from her new boss, which seemed to her somehow incomprehensible. She even thought that maybe she had done something wrong, and he wanted to tell her about it. So she asked him what happened, because she was really starting to worry if she had made some mistakes, or if he didn't like the way she was doing her job. But it turned out that the girl was worried for nothing. He just wanted to tell her that the Duchess had asked her to come after work to discuss something important. After Edith left, her boss decided to check what she had done today, and whether she had completed at least half of her tasks. This was necessary for him to understand how much time the girl had to complete tasks, or how efficient she was during one working day. When he saw that there were quite a lot of papers on her desk, he thought she had done it in a week. But when he found out that she had done it in just one working day, he was pleasantly surprised. And then he realized that Edith was really a very responsible employee, and if you asked her to do something, you could be sure that she would not let you down, and would cope with absolutely anything, no matter how difficult it was for her. Sometimes even he is faced with tasks that take several days to complete. But this girl somehow miraculously manages the same amount of work in a few hours. It is still hard for him to understand how she does it. It turns out that the Duchess knew what she was talking about when she recommended the girl as the best employee, and when she said that Edith could cope with absolutely any case, and never put things off for later. Meanwhile, the girls had already come to her office, and the Duchess told them that tomorrow was a very important day. There would be a seamstresses meeting, so she wished to invite the girls to take part in the... It was the beginning of a fair plot that is held to collect donations. The items offered by the elegant houses are mostly embroidery. Embroidery is one of the activities considered a feminine virtue in this plot. The best time to demonstrate your skills and show the entire empire your talent. A noblewoman preparing for a fair visits a company of women who are very fond of embroidery and can do it professionally. Considering the position of the ducal family among the other noble families of the empire, it was natural for the Duchess to organize a gathering of seamstresses at her home. But there was one problem. The girls didn't quite know how to do it, because they were never into it, in order to at least roughly understand how to do it. The Duchess tried to ignore it. It didn't seem to matter to her whether they could do it or not. She needed them to take part in the event no matter what. And for that, she even brought in an assistant who could teach Edith and Lisi how to sew in a short amount of time. Except that Edith did not want it at all, and realized that she was not interested, for there were many other girls who could take part instead of her, and for them, it would be much more interesting and perhaps useful. Even though it was the Duchess's request, Edith did not imagine herself at this event, for she was not at all fond of sewing, and did not understand why she was being forced to take part in it, so she tried to politely decline, so as not to offend anyone. But suddenly, probably because Lisi didn't want to stay alone, she decided to convince Edith to stay and said that they would succeed. The main thing was to support each other and believe in themselves and their strengths. In order to find some compromise, they agreed that Edith would only take part, and was under no obligation at all to endeavor for victory, so that the Duchess would at least know roughly what to expect from them. Asked Lisi to show her work, that no one expected to have a beautiful result. But they were very much mistaken. Lisi was actually able to survive a very beautiful thing, with which it will not be embarrassing to take part in the event, and even compete with those who have much more experience. Everyone had the impression that Lisi was always hiding her talent, and was waiting for just such a moment to demonstrate her skills. Otherwise, it is impossible to explain how she was able to create such a beauty. Even some women who have been sewing for years have said that they would never have thought that this thing could have been made by a girl with almost no experience or knowledge. When it came time for Edith too to demonstrate what she was going to sew at the event, it was the most exciting moment for her, as she is the least knowledgeable and only took part for the sake of the Duchess. And the most unpleasant thing was when Lisi drew everyone's attention to Edith, and it seemed as if it was on purpose, and to humiliate her. Since she was the one who most lacked any skills and experience, because of this, the girl felt very uncomfortable, but still said that she planned to make some kind of shawl, as it should be the easiest thing to do. When it came time to choose the color of fabric and threads for her product, Edith, strangely enough, even to this approach with all its responsibility, she tried for a long time to understand what colors will be the most between each other, to make it look as aesthetically pleasing and beautiful as possible. And it was very difficult. It turned out to be not so easy just to get a color that would look beautiful. But she had good taste, so there was still a chance that she could do it. At this moment Lisi comes up to her. Her help from the outside looked like an attempt to humiliate or give deliberately bad advice. Lisi suggested choosing pink and yellow, as she thought those shades were perfect for each other. Edith's only thought at that moment was, for what purpose was Lisi trying to help her competitor, if she was so anxious to win? For what purpose was she then trying to suggest some pretty colors, in her opinion, and she had not taken them herself? But Edith supposed it would be better if she did not listen to her after all, and trusted to her own choices. She very much didn't want to embarrass herself in front, and it would be a big risk to trust someone trying to help with color choices for a product. In this situation, Edith was the only one who felt uncomfortable. And instead of all this, she would have preferred to just rest in her room or do her work. It would have been much more useful and pleasant. Of course, she thanked everyone who tried to help her, because she didn't want to look ungrateful. So she explained who had long ago decided on colors for her product, and next time she would definitely take their advice. She originally really liked the 2 shades of gray. She chose them because she thinks of Callian when she embroiders. And besides, since his eyes are gray, the choice of these particular threads was a mismatch. A decision that, of course, the Duchess couldn't help but support. But when Edith remembered that there are people around who can spread gossip, the girl believed asked to keep everything going on in secret, so that no one would know the reason for choosing the color of her product. For the girl, it was very important. Meanwhile, Callian had already arrived at the place, and after the long journey, he was madly eager to finally rest and enjoy the atmosphere around him in a peaceful environment. This place was really far from the capital, and it took a few days to get there. But for such gorgeous views, it was worth it. They had a great time enjoying everything they saw around them. This place was really special. He went there with his father, and he was always regretting that Edith had refused to go with them. So for a while he didn't even listen to his father, who told him that the place had a lot of potential for development, and that it should be used in some way. As it turned out later, their journey amounted to 10 days, but for them, It was not so much, because they are used to such distances, and a week to get somewhere is not considered a great distance. Since this place was really special, from the unique energy around it, Callian hoped his father would give him the place at some point, and assumed it would happen within a year. The castle was in good condition because it had been under the care of a butler for a long time, but there was no elegant decor, luxury, or any other signs of wealth. So you need to immediately look for someone who will pick up suitable furniture. Edith is from the Triegelhoff family, who have never had money problems, so she will never live in a dilapidated castle. While there was a chance, the boy decided to ask how cold it would be in the castle in winter, because it was something to think about now, and if necessary, to solve possible problems in some way. My father told me that it is much colder here than in the capital, but that is not the only problem, because there is usually a lot of snow. Sometimes avalanches can form, so the castle can be isolated from the rest for a while. It wasn't good news, but I had to accept it, because there was no other option, and I had to live with it somehow. His father noticed that his son was in a great mood, so he decided to ask what that was about, because it was the first time he had seen him like that in a long time. Killian said that by living in this castle, there will be many opportunities for development. Because of the large number of young people, it will be possible to start developing other industries besides agriculture. If you make your way through the mountains, these lands can serve as an intermediate base for traders traveling through the empire. Callian's father was very happy that he had already started looking for development options, and he liked everything here, with a lot of doubts until they got here. There are a lot of drawbacks to this castle, but it's still a good option to start a new life. Besides, it has an incredibly pleasant atmosphere and nature around, so he will feel much more pleasant and enjoy his life. Since his father was asking him that, the boy decided not to waste the opportunity, and said what he thought about it. He asked if he should answer the question in any other way, or if he could have asked for more inheritance, or a higher status that his brother would have. The father was well aware of his guilt, but unfortunately could not answer anything, because everything his son said was true, and he could not deny that he had given one of his sons much more than the other one. The guy had a great desire to ask to be made a receiver, or to ask for something more than just a lock, which has a lot of flaws in it, because he's been deprived since he was a kid, and his brother's always gotten the best of everything, unlike him. And it was always like that. Even in some insignificant moments, it seemed to be done on purpose, and no one was trying to hide the fact that he was much less loved than his brother. And then one day, something else came along with it. He used to be able to do whatever he wanted, but that was until one moment that changed his whole life. One evening, nothing to portend trouble, when suddenly he notices on his desk some document, or something resembling a note of, it said something about a contract wedding, without anyone asking his opinion or discussing the subject with him. Someone thought it would be enough to just leave a note on his desk and expect a written response, and it was from that moment that he realized that there was no point in dreaming and hoping that somewhere his opinion would be taken into account, or that someone would do something meaningful and pleasant for him, as it had always been for his brother. All he could do was simply be thankful for what he had. A castle was certainly not a bad thing, but compared to what his brother would get, they certainly had a very big difference in that. And no wonder Callian would be very hurt and unpleasant at times like this. Even though they try to be on good terms with their father, it was never sincere, and was done only to somehow keep communication and some kind of connection. After all, they are relatives who used to live together, and it would be foolish to show his resentments on purpose because of some grievance, and to spoil relations with his father and mother. So the moment came when he was thankful for the legacy, and he said that as soon as he was given the title, he would immediately come here and start managing the estate. Meanwhile, it was time for the beginning of the event to which the Duchess had invited Edith and Lacey to participate, each vendor trying to solicit as many people as possible to come into the store and attract their attention. The fair was really incredibly huge. There were a lot of both sellers and buyers. The girls surrounded by these people felt superfluous, as they were initially uninterested in being here. But the atmosphere was really nice. You could look at a large selection of jewelry and beautiful outfits, and since it's all handmade and incredible luxury, which not everyone can afford, but some people still came to attend the event. There was not only clothes and jewelry. This fair also had delicious desserts, fragrant baked goods, and many appetizing snacks that were impossible to pass by and resist. After a while they reached one of the stalls, and this was the place they were most interested in. Their works were to be there, so the girls were curious to see if they would be bought or not. But most of all, they were afraid that no one would even look at their products. It would be very offensive. The atmosphere was a little tense because each of them was worried about their job. Even though they are not professionals, it would still be nice to see at least one customer, or someone who would be interested in the item. Some items are already pre-booked and someone has bought them. Such items have a special ribbon attached to them, which says that this item is not for sale and already belongs to some person. They were already in anticipation and were waiting for the buyers. Each of the sellers felt the competition, and to some extent even hated each other, and it was normal for such an event, because everyone had worked hard and spent time to prepare for the fair. And of course everyone wants to be near their mini-store was as many as possible, want to buy goods. But apparently, that on the girls' goods, there was a special buyer who was just waiting to buy their embroidery. On account of Edith's going out for a little handkerchief, she felt ashamed to look at it, when there were plenty of pretty clothes around, which were much more attractive to the eye, and so she suggested that Lisi should go away and look at other people's goods. When the girls left and walked around the territory, they did not even realize that very near stood their most desired customer, and the person in front of whom they would be afraid to show their so-called masterpiece. Due to the fact that girls are very rarely at such events, they are uncomfortable enough to be among a large number of people, because they feel uncomfortable and feel as if all the eyes of others are focused on them. Some girls allowed themselves to talk badly about Edith and Lisi, and discuss their appearance, in order to laugh and raise their self-esteem. It was very impolite of them, and they did it in a showy way so that Edith and Lisi would hear it and start to doubt themselves. Especially impolite behaved, it would seem, a grown woman who discussed the appearance of girls, and that they are not worthy to be here, to which her youngest daughter asked to be a little more careful with words, because it can offend someone, but that wasn't the most unpleasant part. After that the woman started discussing Edith's family, and in doing so she spoke so loudly, as if she purposely wanted the girl to hear it and get upset. But thanks to her experience, Edith knew very well that there were always people who would say something bad right in front of a person, so that they would hear everything and feel ashamed. But it was very important not to pay attention to such things. These people do not even realize what moral trauma they can leave because of such statements, especially if a person is not sure of himself and complexed about something. That woman kept saying very unpleasant things and mocking the girl's appearance and personality. They concluded that at this time it is very difficult to fit into society, because everyone is trying to insult someone or make jokes about someone. And it is very sad to realize that the only thing left is to learn to stand up for yourself, and not to give yourself to such people. Which Edith decided to do. She was too tired to listen to what these women had no right to discuss, because it had nothing to do with them. Edith told them that they were acting like people from the village who knew nothing about manners and politeness, and yet they came to embarrass themselves at an event where educated people come, unlike them. And it seems that Edith was very good at standing up for herself and letting them know how not to behave in the company of cultured people. These insolent girls didn't expect someone to answer them and put them in their place. I'm sure they realized that they shouldn't have behaved like that and insulted someone. But that wasn't all. In order to finally put those insolent girls in their place, Edith decided to remind them who they had just tried to insult, and decided to hint about her last name. It finally pissed them off, because the girl had just seen them, and made it clear who was worthy of being at the event, and who wasn't. And to end the conversation nicely, Edith reminded her that if she told her husband about this conversation, they would be in big trouble, and would regret what they had just told her. After that, they didn't know what to say, and their mood had deteriorated considerably, because now they couldn't answer anything, because there might be problems later on. Although Edith tried to keep a calm demeanor, it was very difficult and almost impossible. It was impossible to act calm with such insolent people as those girls were. She became insanely curious to know any information about these insolent guests, who knew nothing about politeness and elementary manners in society. So she asked Lisi if she knew these people. Lisi replied that they were friends of Countess Sinclair, and afterwards apologized, for it was because of her that Edith had to quarrel with them, and that was why she was now in a bad mood for the day. Edith replied that it was nothing and she wasn't upset at all. Besides, she didn't care about them at all, and she was very glad that she had put them in their place. So Lisi didn't have to worry about that. From this point on, a period in the story begins when Lisi's reputation grows considerably, and she begins to be admired by many girls. Lisi starts to get a lot of compliments, and people wanting to be friends with her. At this time, Edith starts to feel like no one wants her, and not as beautiful as Lisi is. Some of the girls, in spite of Edith, who was Killian's future wife, they did not hesitate to suggest that it was Lisi who would be the future daughter-in-law of the Duchess of... And it's all made the girl doubt herself a lot, feel self-conscious, and feel like she doesn't belong in this family. She was constantly starting to be ignored, overlooked, and compared to Lisi's beauty. All these unpleasant moments were inevitable, and she knew it. So there was nothing left but to accept it and try not to be sad about it. After that came the moment when Killian came up to them, and Lisi was the first to run up to him, and they began to say hello and talk to her. And at that moment, Edith thought whether she should go up to say hello to him or not, for she might just be ignored and not even noticed. But she hoped to the last that people still had respect for her and the desire to talk to her. As suddenly, apparently he noticed her after all, and the girl is frantically wondering if he's going to talk to her or continue to ignore her like everyone else does. But a miracle happened, and he came to her after all, and she was overjoyed. After all, he was the only one who paid attention to her. The girl even accidentally almost said that she missed him, but luckily she didn't, because otherwise you'd feel as awkward as possible, because he shouldn't know that the girl missed him so much. And he's as unemotional as ever, and it's hard to know if he's going to say something nice or conflicted. Edith asked why he was looking at her for so long and not saying anything. She even had thoughts that she had done something wrong again, but she was wrong. After she spoke to him, his mood visibly lifted, and he asked if anything interesting had happened while he was away. She actually had a lot to tell, like the fact that she'd been doing a bit of embroidery in order to participate in the fair at the Duchess's request, and said she didn't really want to do it, but there was no way she could say no. As suddenly, in the midst of the conversation, Edith asked to wait for a moment, to fix her makeup a little, and after that she would come right back. But really she was bored and wanted an iced tea. It would have been a perfect day if it had ended there, but unfortunately it was completely different. There was a guy following her when she went out, but she didn't know it yet. As suddenly, he grabs his hand, and because of that, of course, she was incredibly scared. It was very unexpected for her. Plus, she wasn't immediately able to figure out who this man was or what he was after. This guy is obviously here for a reason, and his intentions are not good, because people don't usually say hello like that and don't act like that when they meet each other. Turns out it was Shane Triegelhoff. The girl had completely forgotten that Triegelhoffs are also allowed to come here. This guy only came for one reason, when he received a fake document that was sent in her name. He wanted to look into it, but he didn't know about the fact that the girl had just been staged, and the letter was sent by someone other than her. Because of this misunderstanding, no one knew who was to blame for this situation, because the fraudster is still unknown, and he cannot be found. Apparently he is too good at pretending. And also, Edith sent a letter saying that she didn't want to do her father's job anymore, and now she's on the side of the new family. And when this guy read the letter, he couldn't believe that it was sincere, and it was written by her. But now, Edith told me that she wrote the letter, and it says what she really thinks and thinks is right. They can agree with it or not. Either way, it doesn't change anything. But that wasn't the biggest problem. The fact that the letter was fake and the girl was just being set up. This guy didn't want to accept that as the truth, and was convinced that she was just trying to set up her family. No matter how she tried to convince him that it wasn't her, it was useless. Not a single person believed that it could be true. Only the evidence to prove her involvement is still missing. So for now, no one has the right to accuse her or consider his words a lie. Meanwhile, Killian is still going Edith. The girl promised she'd be back soon, and she's still not here. It's been quite a while, and she could have come back a long time ago. He began to look at her among the other people, but she was not there, and he began to suspect something. As it turned out, it was not in vain. Even so, he just watched Lisi interact with her new friends for a while longer, Killian even suggested that she might have taken offense at all the attention being focused on Lisi, but it wasn't long ago after all. She didn't seem to care at all about other people's opinions, or who they thought was prettier than her or Lisi. At least that's the impression she tried to give to others. Edith usually behaves quite confidently, but apparently in reality, she is a bit offended when she starts to be compared to anyone, and when she is told that she is not worthy of something. Some more time passed. He grew bored of sitting in one place alone and listening to other people's conversations out of desperation. To begin with, he just decided to get up from his chair and walk around a bit, because it was impossible to wait for something and sit in one place for a long time. At some point, it turned out that it was already useless. Although maybe he just decided to go looking for Edith. She could use some help at this very moment. When he started to leave, absolutely all the girls around started looking at him. And of course, each of them liked him madly. There was not a single girl who didn't read him as cute and didn't want to see him at least once. Just his presence alone made them smile and lifted their spirits a lot. They even stopped talking at that moment, and there was complete silence. That he left. He tried to explain that he accidentally spilled juice and needed to go wipe his hands, so he'd be back soon. Which of course was very important to them. His presence made them excited about this beautiful event and enjoy what was going on. In fact, he went to make sure that Edith was all right, as if he knew that she really needed help, and that she was delayed for a reason. For if it had not been for this strange meeting, she would have come back to him long ago. Killian didn't expect to see her talking to someone, and it looked like some kind of conflict, except he wasn't clear if his help was needed in this situation, or if it was better to ignore it and not get involved in someone else's conversation. But on the other hand, even if she needed help, there was no way she could ask him for it. So a decision had to be made quickly, and for some reason he was starting to have thoughts of, could she really be dating and in a relationship with this guy? Except it didn't seem like she was happy with him at this point, and they're being nice somehow. Plus, Edith doesn't look very happy at this point, so obviously she needs help. And when the conversation was over and the girl was alone, Killian couldn't help himself and decided to ask what they were talking about, because it was really important for him to know whether she loved this guy or he was just an acquaintance of hers. If he had listened carefully to what they were talking about, it would have been immediately clear that he had nothing to worry about, and the girl was not in love with the guy, as he had initially thought she was. When she left there, she was surprised to see Killian, and the first thing she thought was that he was just following her, and had been listening to her conversation with that guy the whole time, which of course she would be ashamed of. Edith certainly wouldn't want anyone to hear it. At this point, as she began to remember, it had been a really long time since she had promised to return soon. So the fact that Killian had decided to go looking for her, there was nothing wrong or strange about it on her part. Anyway, even though it was okay that he went to look for her, in any other situation where she couldn't call for help, it would have been the right thing to do for her own safety. But for some reason Edith decided to hide the fact that she was talking to someone, although it was very stupid, because Killian saw everything and knows that she is lying to him. So he became even more interested in finding out who this guy was, and if there was any relationship between them. Even though she was trying to show her displeasure at the fact that he had gone looking for her, she was actually enjoying herself immensely, but for some reason, she didn't want to show it. Maybe she still has some resentment towards him, and she can't show her real feelings and emotions towards him because of the past that left her with unpleasant memories. It actually makes her very happy that someone cares about her, and especially if it's Killian, who is one of the many who cares at least a little bit about her, and he knew it well. For he already knew that when she tried to be indifferent, she had a frightened look in her eyes because she was afraid to show her true emotions. So he always knew when she was lying to him, and when she was telling the truth. When it was time to go to the place where her handkerchief was sold, it turned out that it had already been sold, and someone had bought it. She was very surprised, because she didn't think that someone would like it, and would want to buy it for money. So the girl was very happy that at least one person appreciated her efforts and labor, because she was very much worried that no one would buy it, and on the counter will be left only her scarf, which will be no one needs. But fortunately, she was wrong. Since Killian could not see the handkerchief the girl had made, the Duchess decided to tell him something, which would probably be very pleasant for him. She asked him if he knew the color of the bird that Edith had embroidered on the handkerchief, but he didn't understand why she was asking him that. After which the woman told him that it was the color of his eyes. The girl specifically chose materials of that color to somehow associate her art with him. He had not expected such a thing, and he must have been madly pleased to hear it. And afterward the Duchess said that when the girl was embroidering, she was thinking of him at that moment, but asked him not to tell, and to keep it a secret. But for some reason, he thought that maybe it was a ruse to get her to get along with his mom, so that the Duchess would think well of her. But it turns out that it was Killian who bought Edith's handkerchief. Only it is unknown why he decided to keep it a secret and not to tell anyone. Even his mother did not know about it. Everyone was convinced that this stream was bought really by some person who liked this thing very much. Edith didn't even realize how her life would gradually deteriorate, and how many people would want her to feel bad. At some point, some girl started calling out for her mistress, and a lot of people gathered around her, so this situation could not be ignored. And when Edith saw the guy there, she knew they were up to something, and it might end too badly, because that's what they'd come here for. She wished at that moment that they would just kick them out. Otherwise they would cause a lot of trouble, and make everyone think even worse of Edith. It turns out they wanted to ask the Duchess that the old assistant Edith was accepted to the palace, and here she could help the girl as before, because Sophia is the only maid who took care of Edith many years ago. The guy insisted that only Sophia could be the best helper for the girl, and she needed to be accepted by the collective of their family's attendants. And as strange and impertinent as it may seem, it's a wonder they haven't kicked him out yet, or even tried to listen to him. Edith tried to make it clear that she didn't want that, and that taking Sophia in would be a very big mistake, because they're probably doing it for a reason. They want to create another situation to capitalize on and question Edith's honesty. The main goal is to get the whole family to hate her, and then just kick me back home. And she was the only one who realized it. From the outside, it seemed like this guy wanted to do what was best, and he didn't have any evil intentions. He gave the impression of a guy who could be trusted, but should not be trusted in any way. He has long wanted revenge on Edith for betraying her family and not wanting to do as her father ordered her. The girl perfectly understood what they need, but unfortunately, could not make a decision instead of the Duchess, and at the same time it was impossible to prove something, because these two villains, as it will turn out later, at this point, everyone trusts, and no one cannot be persuaded in it. As a result, it was decided to accept a new assistant, Sophia, and probably it was done only out of pity or politeness before the guests. In fact, they had enough assistants and did not need them. Edith imagined with horror what she would have to endure, because these people cannot be trusted in any way, and they want only one thing, to get some profit by any means, even if it will have to pretend to be not who they are in reality. Unfortunately, even Killian believed these two people, and said that it would probably be a good decision, so they should listen to the girl's relatives, which will turn out to be a big mistake very soon, which they will regret many times more. But at that moment, no one even wanted to listen to her. No matter how hard she tried to prove something or refuse the offer of these villains, she still wasn't heard. The thought of what those two might be up to made her feel bad, and Sophia decided to take advantage of it. But unfortunately, she didn't realize how quickly the trouble would start. Sophia immediately ran up to Edith and pretended like she wanted to help her. But in reality, it was just an excuse to get on with her plan to get revenge on her for betraying her family. Even from her look, it was clear that she was obviously up to something. But unfortunately, nobody noticed it except Edith. Even if she tried to tell someone about it, everyone would think that she was just deceiving them. Killian was the only one who didn't fully trust Sophia, and he still had his doubts about this stranger. Even he realized that everything was being done for a reason, and they were up to something. Therefore, you should observe it properly, because it is the helper of the family, which is their competitor, and they should not be expected to do some good deed for no reason either, as happened on this day. They certainly couldn't refuse her, but that didn't mean anyone would trust her from her first day on the job. Especially Edith's reaction could help make sure that not everything was as it seemed here. After a while, the Duchess ordered one of her assistants to prepare a uniform and a room for the new maid. When Sophia entered the room, she immediately began to check for dust, how clean it was, and the general order of the room. But that was only the beginning, after which Edith was in for a lot of trouble. As Edith watched the assistant, she noticed that Sophia was acting like she cared that the girl had moved, and somehow it was a problem for her personally, and that was really weird. According to the plot, all future episodes will happen because of Sophia's evil intentions, leaks, surveillance, poisoning attempts, all as Edith envisioned in the beginning. But she's still trying to pretend like she had nothing to do with it. And she's very surprised. Why would anyone want to set Edith up? Because it's very unbecoming of that person. This assistant's behavior was so frightening that Edith expected some danger from her at any moment, despite the fact that Sophia was behaving perfectly normally so far. But it was only until one moment, so that Edith did not expect a trick, and could not react in time to defend herself. In just a moment, Sophia was no longer so friendly, and showed who she really was. She allowed herself to be disrespectful to her mistress, and started insulting her. For some reason, she was sure that no one would punish her for this, and she felt free enough to be in front of Edith and not treat her with respect. Sophia was allowing herself to be cruel to her, even though she was in the role of assistant at the moment. And for this behavior, Edith should have stopped it all and punished the maid long ago. The girl was in great pain at that moment, and she even forgot for a while that she was the mistress here, and no one had the right to treat her like that. But for some reason, she couldn't defend herself in front of that poor assistant, and she didn't even say anything to her. So maybe that's why Sophia had a lot of self-confidence, and she knew she wouldn't get hurt. Besides, she was hitting places where no one would notice the bruises, and people would never see the marks unless Edith showed them to them. It was very strange to see an assistant humiliating her mistress and allowing herself too much. One can only hope that Edith will not tolerate it, and will somehow prove to the Duchess that Sophia should be dismissed as soon as possible, and sent back where she came from. Sophia kept asking why the girl betrayed her family, to which she got the answer: Edith just wanted to give advice, because everything is wrong. Surely Prince Langston will win. Although the political situation was not told in the story in great detail, His Majesty's throne is now secure, and Duke Ludwig's family has power equal to that of an archduke. No one dares to oppose the Duke Louis, who won his title through incredible strength and knowledge in this area. Absolutely no one could reach that level to compete with him on an equal footing, so it's very foolish to think that anyone else could win. But Sophia was still sure that the Emperor and Duke Ludwig would lose anyway, to which Edith only smiled and wondered why she had so much confidence in it. It was really funny from her side, because Sophia blindly believes that only the person she worked for will win, but she doesn't look at the actual capabilities of the opponents, and doesn't want to believe that someone else will win. Edith thought it would be pointless to prove anything to her, so she said that everything would become clear in time, and soon Sophia would see for herself and realize that she was wrong. After this situation, when the assistant allowed herself to address her mistress in this way, Edith must now be very attentive to her, and especially not to eat what she brings, for the food from her may indeed be poisoned. Because of her obstinacy, Sophia still tried to persuade the girl that she was talking some nonsense, and she knew better how things would be as a result of the battle, and said that Edith understood absolutely nothing, and even in the simplest of things, the only thing Edith wanted at that moment was for someone to find out how dangerous Sophia is, and what trouble she can cause for their family, because the girl is worried not only for herself, but also for their property. The next day the girl was in no mood to go to work, although without this assistant everything could be much better. With her appearance there were too many problems. It is surprising that no one notices it. Quite recently, she was very excited when she went to work, and with pleasure she did all the tasks. But now, she has no inspiration, and wants to go home as soon as possible. Sophia, who had tormented her before, now that she had become her personal maid on the Duke's estate, began not only to beat her, but to starve her. She was constantly setting some conditions, and was only willing to give her food when Edith did something useful for her. It felt like they had switched roles, and Sophia was in place now, even though she had no right to act like that, and even though the girl still couldn't do anything about it. In this situation, the maid was like the mistress, and the mistress like the maid. In order to change that, it would take the Duchess herself to see that Sophia was not at all what she was trying to appear to be, and that it's better not to trust her in any way. And it seems that Edith has decided to deal with this personally, because she is not going to tolerate these humiliations, so she is ready to show the real face of this assistant in any way she can. It's still unclear why Edith can't stand up for herself and gives in to these humiliations. She could have answered long ago and shown that she can't be treated like that, especially since Sophia doesn't even have the right to say a rude word to her. If I were the girl, it's high time I complained to the Duchess and told the whole truth that they can't see, or just ignore it. Edith remembers very well how cruelly she was treated before, but she is already very much out of it, and has forgotten what it feels like to be humiliated or hurt. And maybe she just let herself be treated like that, just because of the habit of tolerating such treatment. And she forgot that no one in this world has the right to hurt her and tell her what to do, because she is an adult who owes no one anything. So she is not going to give up, and she decided to solve this problem somehow, because in her new life, she will not allow anything like what she had before. She has had enough experience, and she does not intend to suffer like this again. While she was thinking about it, she didn't notice at all how she had eaten absolutely all of the snacks that were meant to last all day. Renan said she seemed to really like them, and they were delicious. Edith didn't even notice that she had eaten the whole plate of appetizers, and didn't even understand what he meant at first. She felt a little embarrassed because she had left nothing at all behind. Only Renan. Apparently he was in no mood today, and was very upset that there was nothing left for him, although he tried and prepared a table with appetizers for all comers. The girl saw that this upset him, and tried to at least appreciate them, and said that they were really delicious, and the fact that she ate the whole thing proved it. Not to be too impudent, since there was only one cookie left, Edith offered it to Renan, to which he replied that the girl could already finish whatever was left, and there was no need to share. They just needed to think about it a little earlier. Also, he said he wasn't a big fan of sweets, so he wasn't too upset. But if it had been snacks he loved, in which case he would have definitely gotten mad for it. It made things a little better, because her boss wasn't a fan of sweets and didn't get upset. She felt a little better, but still she would be more attentive to such moments, so that next time she wouldn't be too brazen. As suddenly, Edith gradually began to notice that her boss is really a handsome man, and she does not understand how before she could completely ignore his unique charisma and beauty. After that, the girl still could not resist, and wanted to eat the last snack, because the cookies were really incredibly tasty, and the man asked if it was necessary to bring more, but she of course refused, and said that it was not necessary. After they had said goodbye, and the girl had gone to her room, she regretted very much that she had not asked for some more cookies. All the evening she had wanted them very much, but still it was awkward to ask for more. But that wasn't the most frustrating part. It turns out that Renan is going on a business trip for a whole week. Because of that time she will have to somehow endure without cookies, and she is terrified to imagine how she will have to suffer and endure for a long time without them for a whole week. Without him, she's going to feel very lonely, and will have to endure Sophia's presence all her free time. And as much as she doesn't want to, until she's proven herself to be the villain's sidekick, she's going to have to be patient and come up with a plan whereby this can come to fruition and she'll finally be kicked out. She was very scared, because Sophia could probably put something bad in Edith's food, which could make her feel bad. So we'll have to keep an eye on that, and make sure it doesn't happen. Besides, it had been a very long time since Callian had come to dinner together. She would be much more relaxed and comfortable with him, for she could count on his support and protection on his part. When the girl thought about it, she began to realize that everything was going on too strangely, as if everybody had conspired to leave Edith and Sophia alone, and that the girl had no support, which Sophia was going to take advantage of. She remembered how Callian had immediately supported the decision to take in this assistant, and hadn't even considered who it might benefit, because giving her own assistant to another family was a very strange decision to make, and he might long ago have realized that it was done on purpose, in order to attain personal advantage through a carefully planned and trained so-called maid, who would carry out these bad intentions of the Count's. Killian should have believed her, not Shane, because only she can see that this is a very well-planned plan that will hurt Callian's family very badly. Because she was so hungry, she couldn't think of anything good, and because of that, she spoiled her own mood. So the girl brought up the decision that while Sophia was gone, she should go for a walk and get some fresh air, and maybe even come up with an idea on how she could kick that rogue out of the house, At this time, Sophia was carrying the girl's breakfast, and thinking that Edith was the sort of person who was very easily manipulated, and who could never stand up for herself. It's because she's been used to being treated badly since she was a child, and she knows that if she defends herself, they'll treat her even worse. So it's better to just tolerate it and not complain. And all this, of course, Sophia knew well, and was sure that no matter how she treated her, Edith would still tolerate any treatment, and would never dare to fight back. When suddenly she hears someone talking to Edith, and she decides to eavesdrop on the conversation, because it might help her learn something useful. Sophia knew roughly who she was talking to, and she definitely recognized from the voice that it was Lisi, who suggested that Edith should have a cup of tea and talk about something interesting, in case the girl wasn't busy and had some free time to spare. Before arriving at the Duke's estate, it was originally the idea of the guy who wanted to ask Sophia to run an errand for him, because he knew that the girl could not refuse him and would do anything he asked her to do, and she was very happy to see him and was ready to fulfill any of his requests. One of them was to find out as much as he could about Lisi Sinclair. It was very important to him, and to set Edith up was not his only object. He liked Lisi very much, so he wanted to know something unusual, and to find out how she spent her day, or what her hobbies and pastimes were, all of which he asked to be mailed to him in a separate letter as soon as possible. There was only one condition, that his father should never know about this conversation and his request. As a result, Sophia agreed, and said she would love to hear all about it. Sophia only pretended that she was happy to help him. In reality, she never hoped to become the master's wife, but wanted to at least just be there for him and help out. But it was a little more complicated than that, and something prevented her from doing it, and it was Lisi. And because of that, Sophia just hated her, and wanted to make sure that she could never be together with her master. And she had a plan for that, and it seemed like the moment had come when she decided to act. Meanwhile, Edith is in her room thinking of nothing but eating. She is already very uncomfortable, and has a feeling of weakness that makes it hard for her to even leave the room and ask for something to be cooked for her. She already had a lot of health problems that made it hard for her to move around, and now she was hungry. But she didn't want to take food from Sophia, because it was too dangerous and stupid, knowing what she was up to. There was also a very unpleasant moment. It seems that Killian and Lisi had seen the girl eyeing someone else's food while walking, but they were not yet aware of the fact that the girl really hadn't eaten anything in a long time. She was most afraid of looking like some pathetic girl who was only interested in food, and it made her feel even worse. She had so many problems lately that she was having a hard time dealing with them all alone. But that's when Sophia walks in, and the girl tried to pretend that her assistant didn't realize that she had just been sad. The assistant brought a very tasty dessert, and the aroma of it could be heard even in the next room. It turned out to be insanely appetizing and flavorful for the girl. It was the peach pie that Lisi had given her, but it was dangerous to eat it, for Edith was not sure that her assistant had not put something in it that could hurt her. Sophia said that she is very lucky, and today she will be able to eat this cake because if a girl doesn't eat anything, everyone might suspect something. So she let Edith eat this dessert today. But her smile was too suspicious, and because of that there was no desire to enjoy these desserts, for it might be the last thing she'd ever have to eat. Flavored peach cobbler and hot black tea. She certainly didn't expect this from Sophia. Edith was so hungry that she no longer trained her attention to the possible risks and consequences after such a treat. And after that, the most interesting part began. The girl tried to show with all her appearance that there was something wrong with the dessert, to say that perhaps someone wanted to poison her, and she was very good at it. Surprisingly, this pie was originally perfectly normal and edible. Edith had just come up with a plan whereby she could solve her problem. The girl started to very realistically make it look like she was getting sick, and blamed it on whoever brought the dessert. Sophia realized that this cake was perfectly normal, and she hadn't spiked anything then. So she began to suspect that it was a poisoning that Edith might have set up. But she was glad anyway, for at this moment Edith was really as bad as she thought she was. Actually the ultimate play to make everyone think that Edith wanted someone to poison her. I wonder if she's gonna frame Lisi, or say that Sophia put something in the cake while she was carrying it. Despite the fact that Sophia was not against Edith suffering and she was bad. But it turns out that everyone may think that it was Sophia who poisoned the girl, because everyone trusts Lisi, and no one will think that it could have been done by Lisi. In this scene, Edith was trying to put Lisi specifically for some reason, and make her a criminal, even though Sophia is actually more deserving of that punishment than anyone else. It turns out that the girl with her own hands added something to the pie that Lisi was making. She found a good moment to do it, and no one noticed it. It becomes insanely interesting who will protect whom, and it will become clear who trusts whom more, because in such a situation, it will be obvious. Even Killian was there at the time, trying to figure out who was really responsible for poisoning Edith. When Sophia realized that she was first on the list of suspects, it was to Edith's advantage not to say anything, so she told her not to overexert herself, and it was better to lie still and not even talk. Suddenly, Edith decided to change the course of events, and apologized for the fact that the girls had to listen to baseless accusations because of her. And after that, she said that she just had a stomach ache, and nothing terrible happened. But Sophia didn't understand what was going on, and started talking about how it couldn't be, because Edith had just been in incredible pain, and it was definitely poisoning, to which she replied that maybe she was just suddenly allergic to peaches, to which the prince replied that it wasn't even funny, and needed to be sorted out. So he ordered a search of the girl's room. Of course everyone was against it, but it was an order after all, and it was too early to be afraid at the moment. The girl was of course very uncomfortable, as it was an indication that she might not be trusted, and so ordered the assistants to search her room to be totally disrespectful to her. It wasn't long before Sophia found something suspicious. It was a jar, with unclear contents inside. It really looked like it had something bad in it. Besides, one look at the can is enough to realize that it's a real poison inside. When this evidence was found, it was obvious that the person who had tried to poison the girl had access to her room, except that it remained to be seen who it was and what it was for. Edith immediately said she was seeing this jar for the first time, and said it made no sense for her to poison herself with this remedy, and she was once again being set up by someone trying to set her up. Only there was one important point. If this poison was so quickly discovered, then why the person to whom it belongs put this jar in the most prominent place, and when searched, it can be easily found? Surely it was done on purpose, and someone was favorable to this jar to be found and immediately noticed. As a result, no one has ever understood who needed to poison Edith, and at the same time make it so that this jar ended up in her room. So the prince decided to personally take over the investigation, and said he would be interested to hear their justification, because he was sure he would definitely be able to declassify the man anyway. When Sophia began to complain, and to say that the prince was doing something wrong, Edith heard it all, and of course she had something to say about it. She said that Sophia is trying to appear smart, when in fact she can't do it properly herself, and also has the nerve to accuse someone of just trying to make sense of the situation and find the villain. To which Sophia replied that if Edith said one more word, she would regret it very much. In the meantime, Killian has begun to get serious about this investigation, and has turned to a specialist who can help with the situation, and possibly tell some useful information. It turns out that the contents of the jar do not have any strong effect, so the girl will be fine, and her health is not threatened, except that it may cause abdominal pain, and with a weak stomach can cause a little more serious consequences. With this information, the man really reassured the prince, and it became clear that at least the girl's health was in no danger, and she would get off and suffer only a slight pain in the stomach. As the doctor was about to leave, his assistance was again needed, and the prince came to her with a little request. He said that the girl seemed to be very unwell, and needed some help urgently, so he asked for something for pain relief, and preferably of good quality and long-lasting effect. To which the girl replied that even if she added a painkiller to her treatment, it wouldn't do any good for his wife. To which Killian was surprised, and asked what she meant. After all, it wasn't a strong poison, which shouldn't cause any major health problems. It turns out that because Edith has not eaten anything for several days, even this amount of poison can lead to her death. And in this case, it is much more serious than it seems, so we need to monitor her condition very carefully. The news that Edith had not eaten anything for several days was surprising to him, because he had seen how this girl loved food, and would never refuse any meal. It turned out that she was starving, certainly not of her own free will, and this also had to be solved. He could not believe that Edith had at some time made up her mind to eat less food, or to starve herself for some purpose, There must surely be some other reason for it, and he knew it. Killian tried to convince the doctor that it just wasn't possible. She wasn't the kind of girl who was into various diets or starvation diets. He remembered very well how at the first meeting she had eaten more than half of what the assistants had prepared for them, and after that she had wanted dessert too. As suddenly, he himself became confused in his own thoughts, and thought that she might have poisoned herself for some purpose, and he imagined that even though she was aware of her condition, she still decided to poison herself and put that ingredient in her food. The only reason, in his opinion, that could make the girl do this to herself is the desire to attract as much attention to herself as possible, since lately, she really almost no one communicates with her. I had to figure out how to talk to her about it, and find out the real reason why she'd done it to herself. And if it could be fixed, he would definitely do it. Callian remembered that she had not doubted herself at all before. She really liked the way she looked, and was not like that girl who had little attention from men. Some time ago she really was a very attractive woman, whom absolutely everyone who saw her wanted to meet, and even in a crowd of many girls, she was very different and special. And now, no one is paying attention to her, and she is just in the shadows. Her place was taken by Lisi, but she didn't have time to notice. At what point it all happened, and how could she let it happen, after what had happened? And then he knew exactly why. Because she must have been in need of attention for a long time, which no one was giving her. And no wonder she felt insecure and lonely. He felt a little sorry for her, for as her husband he should not have allowed it. And now he resolved to see her as often as possible, and to give her as much attention as was sufficient for her. When he saw that she was awake and able to talk, he asked her one question, which he expected her to answer as honestly as possible. He was very much interested in why Edith had taken the poison, for in her condition, it might have been much more dangerous than she might have realized. To which she replied, just as she had imagined, once again no one believes her and accuses her of having done it, and also that she is used to being blamed for everything, even if it isn't true, in order to generate a little self-pity. Besides, she didn't want to discuss this topic at all. She didn't expect that because of hunger, the effect of poison could be much more dangerous than in that situation, if the girl was not hungry and had eaten normally all these days. So she asked him to retire to his room, as she needed time to get a good rest, and without it, she could not regain her health. So she should take it as responsibly as possible. Meanwhile, in Killian's father's study, everyone had gathered to discuss the subject and decide who they would blame for what had happened, and almost everyone was sure that Edith had slipped the poison into her own hands to frame someone else, namely Lisi. They've been trying to convince the girl that she saw Sophia find that jar in Edith's room, so it must be her doing it. To which she replied, if it was done to frame her, why did Edith say she was sick and not blame it all on Lisi? She was sure to the last that Edith did not mean to set her up, and everyone is wrong to suspect Edith of what happened, because she has absolutely no reason to hate the girl. They're very good at socializing and they've never had any conflicts, so they could be best friends in the near future. And it proves the fact that she's definitely not guilty of anything, and they're only trying to complete the investigation for nothing. When the Duchess told Edith about what Lisi had said about her, she was very pleased. It was a real support from her side, which she had not expected to receive at all. Because of that she even cried a little. They were tears of happiness. So she decided to get her some sort of gift, and the idea was of course supported by the Duchess, and she said that Lisi would surely appreciate it, and she would be insanely pleased with it. After that, they started thinking about what would be really enjoyable and useful for Lisi. Since she really likes reading and embroidery, it would be difficult to choose a book, so you could find something from embroidery supplies. Edith had made her choice after all, and had decided what would be the best present for Lisi would be several kinds of silk threads. It must be very useful and pleasant for the girl, for she had never thought of a better present to give her. Her life was finally starting to get better, and even at work she felt pleasant enough, despite the fact that Sophia was sitting next to her, trying to ruin her mood with her strange looks. And of course things couldn't have gone so well. The prince walks into her office and he probably didn't like something. He started yelling at her too loudly, and that was even before he walked in. Except she had no idea what she'd already done that he might not like. He kept yelling about Edith doing something wrong again. She was causing trouble again. Did it have anything to do with her present for Lisi? Though if she was to be blamed for that too, it would be too much. He kept asking if she would deny her guilt this time, to which she asked him to explain everything first, and then she would give some answer, because from his words it was very difficult to understand what he meant. The thing is that there was a really unpleasant situation. Lisi fell and lies unconscious for a long time, and no one can understand what happened to her. She was embroidering with threads, and at one point got very badly poisoned, and the prince was told that Edith was certainly to blame for it, for she had given her this set. But the girl said it couldn't be, and she didn't know what it meant, and the seller packed the threads, and then she gave the gift to Lisi, so no one could open it and put poison in it. Actually, in the original story, there was an attempt to poison Lisi at this point. It's exactly as scripted. Sophia puts poison on the thread needle, and the poisoning episode happens. But she thought she could prevent it, so Sophia couldn't do anything. So it turns out her efforts to protect her friend were pointless. The prince was very much angry with the girl and tried to blame her for something, and she in turn tried to prove that she couldn't have done it. They blamed the completely wrong person, as they usually do. So she told him, in spite of the fact that he suspected her, she asked him to calm down and think straight. In that case, because of the pie incident, everyone's attention has turned to her, and it turns out she's stupid enough to make a gift at this point for Lisi. And it seems that she was able to change his mind, and he thought that maybe the person who was actually involved in these horrible acts was out of suspicion, and just watching what was happening. He's already having such a hard time deciding who to trust, and who not to trust, that he's started to suspect even people he would never have thought such a thing. But there really are too many situations lately that she could be involved in. He then asked her what she could tell him that would make him trust her, so that he could protect her no matter what happened. To which she replied that they could appoint a maid to watch the girl and report on her every move. That way they could be sure that she was telling them the truth, and that was the only way to prove that she was not involved in the situation. And of course Sophia was against it, because she had so many more plans and opportunities to get back at Edith. And when he got an assistant, he wouldn't be able to do anything bad to Edith, because someone else would be looking after her. Thus, it will not only prove her innocence, but also the girl can finally feel safe, because if Sophia is planning something, her new assistant will immediately notice it, and will not let it happen. Killian of course doubted for a long time and didn't understand what it was for, or if it would help. But in the end he still agreed, because he had no other options how to solve this situation. And since the girl herself offers and agrees to an assistant who will follow her, maybe she was really suspected for nothing, and everyone will be convinced that she was telling the truth. After this, Killian wasted no time in ordering the butler to make Anne again Edith's maid, and she was very glad that her request was complied with at once, and not ignored as it usually is. Had his attitude to her improved, and he realized that it was wrong of him to suspect her of anything, though it could not be undone. But at least he began to listen to her, and do what she asked him to do. From now on she will be relatively safe, because next to Sophia, every day was like the last for her, because this girl is only set up for bad, and you never want to see her around her. After Killian resolved the problem with the assistant, and ordered the butler to deal with it, he asked how to find the person who had something to do with poisoning Lisi, to which the girl asked if they had checked the vendor who sold the threads. Turns out he'd already been questioned recently. Apparently he was a well-known salesman, so surely he wouldn't risk his business and lose his customers. And that makes sense. So he's no longer under suspicion. It remains to be seen if anyone had access to the gift after the girl received it. For few could enter Lisi's room at will, but there were people who were allowed to do so. The girl's maid, him, and Cliff. After that, the girl decided to say that her words might sound like an excuse, but it seems someone keeps making her guilty, and she's sure that this way someone is trying to hurt Lisi by covering for her. Because if she's unconscious or dead, and Edith is punished for it, whoever this man is will get what he needed, and that way it'll be easier to find this man by watching his reaction. Those words were convincing enough, and Killian thought it was a very good idea, so he asked her to keep talking about it, and offer her options. She said that this person could be Count Sinclair. There are rumors that his free children have tried to harm Lisi several times, so they could be suspected as well. After all, they could also be involved, and have a benefit if something happens to Lisi. but for some reason no one has remembered them, and instead suspect Edith. And she also said, among the many servants of this mansion, there are those who are not to be trusted at all, and periodically it would not hurt to check these people's sincerity and honesty towards the family in which they work. Maybe one of them is Sinclair's spy.